I'm so devastated by what's happened, by the loss of Don. Don is still in hospital, the loss of Ian and Heather and Gail.
Erin Patterson was named as a suspect
following a deadly mushroom dish.
The woman who cooked the lethal lunch.
On July 29, 2023, 4 people accepted a dinner invitation that would become their last meal. But was this a tragic accident, or the most calculated family murder Australia has ever seen? Welcome to another episode of Whispers of the Criminal Mind. I'm your host, and today we're traveling to the quiet dairy farming town of Leongatha, Victoria, population 5,000, where everyone waves to neighbors and Sunday roasts bring families together. This is a place where front doors stay unlocked, where the biggest scandal might be someone's prize-winning cow or the local football team's performance. But on that cold winter afternoon in July, evil walked through a suburban front door carrying flowers and wearing a smile. Don Patterson, 70 years old, retired and devoted grandfather. Gail Patterson, 70, his beloved wife of decades. Heather Wilkinson, 66, Gail's sister and closest confidant. Ian Wilkinson, 68, Baptist pastor and man of unwavering faith. 4 people who lived their lives trusting others, who believed in the goodness of family bonds, who never questioned a home-cooked meal from someone they loved. They arrived that Saturday expecting beef Wellington, warm conversation, and maybe the chance to see their grandchildren. They had no idea they were walking into an execution disguised as lunch. The weapon wasn't a gun or a knife. It wasn't poison purchased from some dark corner of the internet. No, the murder weapon grew in the forests of Victoria, innocent-looking mushrooms that contain one of nature's most perfect toxins. Death-cap mushrooms, Amanita phalloides, beautiful to look at, odorless when cooked, and absolutely lethal. Within hours, all 4 guests would be fighting for their lives in hospital beds. Within a week, 3 would be dead, and the 4th would spend months recovering, describing himself as half alive, without his wife beside him. The woman who prepared this meal? Erin Patterson, 48-year-old mother of 2, active church member, and the perfect daughter-in-law. At least, that's how she appeared to everyone around her. But appearances, as you'll discover, can be the most dangerous lies of all. If cases like this fascinate you, hit that subscribe button because we're going deep into the psychology of family killers. We'll explore how someone can smile while serving death, how trust becomes a weapon, and why the people closest to us sometimes pose the greatest threat. This isn't just a story about mushrooms or poison. This is about the masks we wear, the resentments we hide, and how family dinners can become crime scenes. This is about a woman who turned the most sacred act, sharing a meal with loved ones, into the ultimate betrayal. So buckle up, because what you're about to hear will change how you think about family gatherings forever. To understand how someone could smile while serving poison, we need to go back to the beginning. Meet Erin Trudy Scudder, born September 30, 1974, in Glen Waverley, a quiet southeastern suburb of Melbourne. From the outside, her life looked like the Australian dream unfolding exactly as it should. Erin was ambitious from the start. She enrolled at the University of Melbourne in 1992, initially pursuing science before switching to accounting, a practical choice that revealed her calculating mind even then. But Erin wanted something more dynamic, more prestigious. By 2001, she had completed training as an air traffic controller, one of the most high-pressure jobs imaginable. Managing the skies above Melbourne's busy airports required split-second decisions, absolute precision, and nerves of steel. For nearly 2 years, from February 2001 to November 2002, Erin guided aircraft safely through Australian airspace. It was demanding work that paid well and commanded respect. But something drew her away from the control tower. By 2004, she had joined the RSPCA as an animal management employee at Monash City Council. The shift seemed to reveal a softer side, someone who cared about vulnerable creatures, someone with a heart for rescue and rehabilitation. When Erin married Simon Patterson in 2007, everyone saw a couple destined for happiness. She was intelligent, successful, and caring. Simon was building his career, and together they represented the upwardly mobile suburban family that neighbors admired. They moved to Western Australia, where Erin opened a charming second-hand bookshop in the small town of Pemberton. She surrounded herself with stories and literature, creating a cozy haven where locals could browse and chat. Their family grew with the birth of a son, followed by a daughter. Erin threw herself into motherhood with apparent devotion, becoming the kind of parent who attended every school event, volunteered for fundraisers, and made elaborate birthday cakes from scratch. When the family relocated back to Victoria to be closer to Simon's parents, Dawn and Gail, Erin seamlessly integrated into the Leongatha community. At the local Baptist church, she was known as helpful and reliable. She assisted with community events, offered to bring meals to families in need, and always seemed ready with a warm smile and a kind word. Dawn and Gail Patterson adored their daughter-in-law, often praising her cooking and her dedication to their grandchildren. But tragedy struck when both of Erin's parents died of cancer, her mother around 2011, her father in 2019. The inheritance was substantial, a $900,000 beachfront home in Eden, New South Wales, plus other assets that made Erin financially comfortable. She used this wealth generously, offering interest-free loans to family members and deferring full-time work to focus on her children. Yet beneath this perfect surface, cracks were forming. The first major rupture came in 2015 when Erin and Simon separated. They reconciled, but the foundation had shifted. By 2022, when Simon filed his tax return listing himself as single, the financial implications hit Erin hard. Her government child support payments were affected, and suddenly money became a battlefield. Online, away from her public persona, Erin began venting about the Patterson family. The helpful daughter-in-law who smiled at church gatherings was privately expressing resentment and anger. Simon noticed the change too. He started experiencing strange symptoms after eating meals Erin prepared, symptoms severe enough to require hospitalization. How well do we really know the people closest to us? The question haunted Simon as he began to fear the woman he had once loved enough to marry. The perfect marriage facade couldn't hold forever. After their 2015 separation, Erin and Simon entered a toxic cycle of breaking up and getting back together, each reconciliation more strained than the last. They maintained separate households but shared custody of their children, then around 16 and 11, creating a complex web of forced interaction that neither could escape. Dawn and Gail Patterson became the anchor points in this fractured family dynamic. The children adored their grandparents, and Simon's parents genuinely loved Erin, seeing her as the devoted mother they had always hoped their son would find. Family vacations continued, with all of them traveling together despite the marital problems. To outsiders, it looked like a modern, amicable separation where everyone put the children first. But Erin was drowning in isolation. While Simon moved on with his life, she found herself increasingly dependent on the very people she was beginning to resent. The Patterson family gatherings that once brought her joy now felt like performances where she had to smile and pretend everything was fine while watching Simon interact freely with his parents and their grandchildren. The breaking point came in 2022 when Simon made a decision that would change everything. He filed his tax return declaring himself as single. This wasn't just paperwork, it was a financial weapon that directly impacted Erin's eligibility for government child support payments. Despite inheriting nearly $1 million in assets, Erin had structured her life around those support payments, using them while keeping her inherited wealth untouched. Money transformed from a resource into a battlefield. Erin accused Simon of deliberately sabotaging her financial stability. Simon argued he was simply being honest about their relationship status. The children became pawns in discussions about schooling, future plans, and who would make major decisions about their lives. What had once been cooperative co-parenting became a power struggle where every conversation carried underlying threats. During this period, something far more dangerous began happening. Between November 2021 and September 2022, Simon started falling mysteriously ill after eating meals Erin prepared. The first incident followed a penne bolognese dinner during one of their attempted reconciliations. Simon was hospitalized with severe gastrointestinal symptoms that baffled doctors. Then came the chicken korma curry incident. Simon fell into a coma and required emergency surgery. Medical staff couldn't identify the cause, but Simon's suspicions were growing. When a third incident occurred after eating a vegetable curry wrap Erin had prepared for a family outing, Simon did something that would later save his life. He created a detailed spreadsheet. This wasn't paranoia, this was survival instinct. Simon meticulously tracked every meal Erin prepared, every symptom he experienced, and the timeline of his illnesses. His research led him to suspect barium carbonate, commonly found in rat poison. Though toxicology tests never confirmed this specific substance, the pattern was undeniable. Simon only got violently ill after eating food his estranged wife prepared. The psychological warfare escalated. Simon began refusing meals from Erin, a rejection that cut deeper than their marital problems. Food represents love, care, and nurturing, the fundamental ways we show affection to family. When Simon started bringing his own meals to family gatherings or eating beforehand, everyone noticed the tension. Family members saw Simon's behavior as excessive, even cruel. How could he suspect Erin, who had always been such a caring cook, of trying to harm him? But Simon's fear was rational, born from a pattern of near-death experiences that coincided perfectly with Erin's cooking. Have you ever ignored red flags in a relationship? Let us know in the comments what warning signs people should never ignore, because Simon's story shows us that sometimes the people closest to us pose the greatest danger. What was happening to Erin psychologically during this period reveals the deadly combination of narcissistic injury and financial desperation. Being rejected, especially by someone she had once controlled through their relationship, triggered a rage that festered beneath her helpful church lady exterior. Her financial dependency on government payments, despite her substantial wealth, created a sense of victimization that justified increasingly extreme actions. The woman who once guided aircraft safely through dangerous skies was now plotting a far more dangerous course, and Simon's growing awareness of the threat made him her primary target. Saturday, July 29, 2023, started like any other weekend in Leongatha. The invitation had come from Erin a few days earlier. Would everyone like to come for lunch? She wanted to discuss the children's schooling options and talk about the possibility of reconciliation with Simon. Her voice on the phone was warm, hopeful, exactly what a separated family member would want to hear. Dawn and Gail Patterson were delighted. At 70, they cherished every opportunity to see their grandchildren and support their family through difficult times. Gail called her sister Heather Wilkinson immediately. Would she and Ian like to join them? It would be wonderful to have the whole family together, to share a meal and perhaps witness the healing of a broken marriage. Heather, 66, had always been Gail's closest confidant. The sisters spoke daily, shared everything, and had supported each other through decades of joy and sorrow. When Gail was excited about something, Heather felt that joy too. Ian Wilkinson, 68, was a Baptist pastor who had spent his life believing in redemption and second chances. If Erin and Simon were ready to rebuild their relationship, Ian wanted to offer his support and prayers. Simon was also invited, of course. But when Erin called him, his response was immediate and chilling. No, I'm not coming. I think you might poison me. The words hung in the air between them. Erin later claimed she laughed at this accusation, dismissing it as Simon being dramatic. But Simon's fear was rooted in 3 near-death experiences that had taught him to trust his instincts above social politeness. The 4 guests arrived at Erin's Leongatha home that Saturday afternoon with flowers and optimism. Don brought wine, as he always did. Gail carried a dessert she had prepared. Heather and Ian came bearing gifts for the children and hopes for family healing. They trusted Erin completely. She was family, the mother of their beloved grandchildren, someone who had shared countless meals with them over the years. Erin had prepared beef Wellington, an elaborate dish that requires hours of preparation and considerable culinary skill. The beef is wrapped in pâté and duxelles, a finely chopped mushroom mixture, then encased in puff pastry. It's the kind of meal that says, I care enough to spend all day cooking for you. The irony would become apparent later. Erin had chosen one of the few dishes where mushrooms are not only expected but essential to the recipe. Hidden within that Duke cell were death-cap mushrooms, Amanita phalloides, nature's most efficient killer. These mushrooms contain amanitin, a toxin so potent that just 30 grams can kill an adult. The poison is heat-stable, meaning cooking doesn't reduce its lethality. Even more cruel, amanitin has no taste, no smell, and no immediate symptoms. The victim feels fine for 6 to 12 hours while the toxin systematically destroys their liver and kidneys at the cellular level. The conversation around Erin's dining table was normal, even pleasant. Dawn and Gail talked about their grandchildren's achievements. Heather shared updates about her garden. Ian discussed upcoming church events. Erin played the gracious hostess, serving generous portions of her carefully prepared Wellington, ensuring everyone had plenty to eat. Did Erin eat the poisoned meal herself? This question would haunt investigators later. She claimed to have consumed the same food, even saving leftovers that her children allegedly ate the next day. But the timing of her reported symptoms and her refusal of medical treatment would raise serious doubts about her truthfulness. The guests left that evening feeling satisfied and hopeful. The meal had been delicious, the conversation warm, and there seemed to be genuine possibility for family reconciliation. They had no idea that amanitin was already coursing through their bloodstreams, beginning its deadly work. Sunday morning, July 30th, brought the first symptoms. It started as what seemed like food poisoning, nausea, vomiting, severe abdominal cramps. Dawn called Erin to ask if she was experiencing similar symptoms. Gail reached out to Heather, who was also feeling unwell. Ian was bedridden with what felt like the worst gastroenteritis of his life. By Sunday evening, all four were in emergency rooms across the region. The symptoms weren't improving, they were escalating rapidly. Doctors initially treated them for severe food poisoning, but the patients continued deteriorating. Blood tests revealed liver enzymes climbing to dangerous levels. Kidney function was failing. These weren't typical food poisoning cases, something had caused massive organ damage. Tuesday, August 1st, marked the beginning of desperate medical interventions. All four patients were transferred to specialized units as their conditions became critical. Don Patterson was rushed to Melbourne for an emergency liver transplant, the only hope of saving his life. Friday, August 4th, became the day of unthinkable loss. Gail Patterson, the devoted grandmother who had arrived at lunch with dessert and hope, died from liver failure. Hours later, her sister Heather Wilkinson, who had shared 66 years of sisterly love and confidences, also succumbed to the poison. Saturday, August 5th, completed the tragedy. Don Patterson, despite receiving a new liver, could not overcome the massive organ damage. The devoted grandfather who had brought wine and optimism to what he thought was a reconciliation lunch became the third victim of Erin's beef Wellington. Ian Wilkinson, the Baptist pastor who believed in redemption, survived but paid a terrible price. He spent 7 weeks in hospital, including time in a medically induced coma, fighting for his life while grieving his wife. When he finally emerged, he described himself as half alive, a man who had lost not just his health, but his life partner of decades. Throughout this nightmare, Erin maintained her performance. She claimed to have experienced stomach pains and diarrhea, symptoms she attributed to eating the same meal. She expressed concern about her children, who had allegedly eaten leftovers, and arranged for them to receive medical checkups. But when doctors offered to hospitalize her for observation and treatment, she refused, claiming her symptoms weren't severe enough to warrant admission. The perfect victim facade was complete. Erin positioned herself as another unfortunate casualty of a tragic accident, while 3 people lay dying from the meal she had carefully prepared. When 3 people die from the same meal within days of each other, authorities move fast. Victoria police launched their investigation while the victims were still fighting for their lives in hospital beds. The challenge was enormous. Proving intentional poisoning requires more than just identifying the toxin. Investigators needed to demonstrate deliberate action, premeditation, and criminal intent. The case immediately captured public attention across Australia. A family lunch turning into multiple murders struck at the heart of what Australians consider sacred, the safety of sharing a meal with loved ones. Media outlets struggled with how to cover an ongoing investigation while respecting the grieving families, but the story's shocking nature made it impossible to ignore. Forensic teams began by testing everything: food samples from Erin's kitchen, hospital blood work from the victims, and soil samples from areas around Leongatha where death cap mushrooms might grow naturally. The amanitin toxin was confirmed in all 4 victims, but identifying the source would prove crucial to building a murder case. When detectives first interviewed Erin, she appeared cooperative and devastated by the tragedy. She denied owning any equipment that could be used to prepare or dry mushrooms. No food dehydrator, no special preparation tools, just standard kitchen equipment that any home cook might have. Her story was simple: she had purchased the mushrooms from an Asian grocery store months earlier and simply cooked them as she would any ingredient. But modern policing relies on more than witness statements. CCTV cameras are everywhere in Australian towns, recording the mundane details of daily life that become crucial when crimes unfold. Footage from multiple locations began painting a different story about Erin's activities in the days following the poisoning. On July 31st, 2 days after the fatal lunch and 1 day after her guests first fell ill, cameras captured Erin at a skip bin in nearby Kenmora. She was disposing of something bulky, something she clearly didn't want found. The footage showed her acting nervously, looking around to ensure no one was watching, then quickly dumping an item before driving away. When police located and searched that skip bin, they discovered a food dehydrator, a device specifically designed to remove moisture from foods like mushrooms, preserving them for long-term storage. This wasn't just any random appliance. Forensic testing revealed Erin's fingerprints on the device, along with traces of death cap mushroom toxins embedded in the drying trays. Confronted with this evidence, Erin's story began changing. She admitted to lying about owning the dehydrator, claiming she had panicked and disposed of it because she feared being blamed for the deaths. Her new version of events involved purchasing dried mushrooms from an Asian supermarket in Mount Waverley 3 months before the lunch, storing them without proper labeling, and accidentally using deadly varieties instead of safe ones. But forensic science doesn't lie the way people do. Laboratory analysis confirmed that the victim's blood contained lethal levels of amanitin, concentrations that could only come from consuming significant quantities of death cap mushrooms. The toxin levels were far too high to result from accidental contamination or misidentification. Digital forensics provided the most damning evidence. Erin's mobile phone contained deleted text messages and search history that painted a chilling picture of premeditation. While the exact Erin was remanded to Dame Phyllis Frost Centre, Victoria's maximum security women's prison. Even behind bars, her behavior continued to raise concerns. In July 2025, while awaiting sentencing, she was investigated for allegedly tampering with prison food after another inmate became seriously ill following a meal. The incident suggested a pattern of behavior that didn't end with her arrest, a compulsion to use food as a weapon that persisted even in custody. The digital age means our lies leave traces everywhere. What do you think about privacy versus justice in criminal investigations? Should our phone records and search histories be fair game when serious crimes are involved? Every text message we delete, every internet search we make, every movement captured by security cameras creates a digital footprint that can expose the truth years later. Erin Patterson learned this lesson too late. Her carefully planned crime was undone by the very technology that surrounds our daily lives. On April 29, 2025, the Supreme Court of Victoria in Morwell became the stage for one of Australia's most watched murder trials. The jury of 10 men and 5 women would decide whether Erin Patterson was a grieving family member who accidentally poisoned her loved ones, or a calculated killer who used food as her weapon of choice. Outside the courthouse, a media circus had formed that court officials described as a traveling show. True crime enthusiasts camped out for seats in the public gallery. Podcasters live-streamed from nearby cafes. Documentary crews interviewed anyone willing to talk about the case. The trial had captured Australia's morbid fascination with suburban evil hiding behind perfect facades. Inside the courtroom, Erin sat alone at the defense table, a stark contrast to most criminal trials where family and friends show support. Throughout the weeks of proceedings, only one friend attended regularly, a solitary figure in a sea of media representatives, legal professionals, and curious onlookers. The isolation was telling. The woman who had once been surrounded by church community and extended family now faced her fate with almost no one beside her. The prosecution painted a picture of deliberate, calculated murder. They argued that Erin's motive was multifaceted, eliminating Simon's parents who influenced his decisions about their marriage, clearing obstacles to reconciliation, and potentially benefiting financially from inheritances or custody arrangements. Prosecutors revealed that Erin had fabricated a cancer diagnosis in messages to some family members, using sympathy as a tool to ensure her victims would attend the fatal lunch. The evidence of consciousness of guilt was overwhelming. Her immediate disposal of the food dehydrator, her lies to police about owning the device, her deleted phone messages, all pointed to someone who knew exactly what she had done and desperately tried to cover her tracks. The defense strategy focused on creating reasonable doubt about intent. They argued this was a terrible accident, that Erin had accidentally foraged death cap mushrooms while gathering what she believed were safe varieties. Her lies to police were explained as panic responses from someone facing accusations she couldn't comprehend. The defense challenged the prosecution to prove premeditation beyond reasonable doubt, arguing that fear and confusion could explain her suspicious behavior. Simon Patterson testified as the first witness, his appearance marking the first time the estranged couple had been in the same room since the poisonings. He disputed Erin's claims about their relationship, her character, and her knowledge of mushroom varieties. His testimony about the prior poisoning incidents, though not part of the main charges, painted a disturbing pattern of escalating violence. Ian Wilkinson's testimony broke hearts throughout the courtroom. The surviving pastor, still bearing physical and emotional scars from his ordeal, described the agony of losing his wife and nearly losing his own life. His words about being half alive, without Heather resonated deeply with jurors who saw the human cost of Erin's actions. Expert witnesses in mycology explained the deadly nature of death cap mushrooms and the impossibility of accidentally mistaking them for edible varieties when preparing food. Toxicology experts detailed how amanitin destroys human organs and confirmed the massive doses found in the victims' systems. What emerged during the trial was a psychological profile of someone who appeared normal on the surface but harbored deep resentments and an inability to accept rejection. Erin displayed classic traits of narcissistic personality disorder, an inflated sense of self-importance, a deep need for excessive attention and admiration, and a lack of empathy for others. When her marriage failed and Simon rejected her attempts at reconciliation, the narcissistic injury triggered a deadly response. Family annihilators like Erin often present as model citizens, helpful church members, devoted parents, reliable neighbors. This facade serves two purposes: it provides cover for their planning and satisfies their need to be seen as perfect. When their carefully constructed image is threatened by divorce, financial problems, or public exposure, they can turn lethal with shocking suddenness. The banality of evil was on full display throughout the trial. Erin wasn't a monster with obvious warning signs, she was a suburban mother who volunteered at church events and made elaborate birthday cakes. Her ordinariness made her crimes more terrifying, not less. If someone like Erin could commit such calculated murders, what did that say about the people we trust in our own lives? On July 7, 2025, after weeks of testimony and careful deliberation, the jury delivered their verdict: guilty on all 3 counts of murder and 1 count of attempted murder. The courtroom was silent as the forewoman read each count, sealing Erin's fate. September 8, 2025, marked another historic moment, Victoria's first live broadcast criminal sentencing. Justice Michael Croucher sentenced Erin Patterson to 3 concurrent life terms plus 25 years, with a non-parole period of 33 years. She would be eligible for release in 2056, at age 82, if she lived that long. Justice Croucher's comments during sentencing focused on the ultimate betrayal of family trust. He noted that sharing a meal represents one of humanity's most fundamental acts of care and hospitality, and that Erin had corrupted this sacred ritual into an act of murder. Her crime struck at the very foundation of family bonds and social trust. The ripple effects of Erin Patterson's crimes extend far beyond the courtroom walls. Ian Wilkinson continues his daily battle with survival, both physical and emotional. The man who once preached about faith and redemption now faces each morning knowing his wife Heather will never again share coffee with him or laugh at his stories. His recovery from the poisoning left him with permanent health complications, but the emotional wounds cut deeper than any physical damage. The children at the center of this tragedy lost more than most people can comprehend. Their grandparents Don and Gail, who had been constants in their lives, were gone forever. Their great-aunt Heather, who had showered them with love and attention, would never attend another birthday party or school event. Most devastatingly, their mother, however flawed, was now serving life in prison. These young people must somehow build futures while carrying the weight of knowing their mother murdered the people who loved them most. Simon Patterson achieved the vindication he never wanted. His fears about being poisoned, once dismissed as paranoid and cruel, were proven tragically correct. But validation came at a price no one should pay, the death of his parents and the destruction of his children's sense of security. He must now help his kids process the unthinkable while dealing with his own trauma and guilt. In Leongatha, population 5,000, the case shattered the community's sense of safety. Neighbors who once shared meals without hesitation now wonder about the people they trust. Local church communities grapple with how someone who appeared so helpful and faithful could harbor such deadly intentions. The town that prided itself on knowing everyone now questions whether they really knew anyone at all. Australia's fascination with the mushroom murders spawned countless podcasts, documentary series, and cultural analyses. The case tapped into primal fears about domestic violence, family dysfunction, and the masks people wear in public. Erin Patterson became a household name, synonymous with betrayal and suburban evil. The mushroom murderer entered Australian criminal folklore alongside other notorious killers, but with a unique horror: she used food, the most basic expression of care, as her weapon. This case reveals warning signs we all need to recognize. When someone explicitly fears being poisoned by their partner, as Simon did, believe them. Financial control, like Erin's manipulation of government benefits despite her wealth, is a form of abuse that can escalate to violence. Perfect public personas often hide the deepest dysfunction. The most helpful church member or devoted parent might be capable of unthinkable acts. Most importantly, trust your instincts about people close to you. Simon's gut feelings about Erin's cooking saved his life, even when family members thought he was being unreasonable. Our subconscious minds often recognize danger before our rational thoughts catch up. The bigger questions this case raises are uncomfortable but necessary. How did family meals, symbols of love, care, and togetherness, become weapons of mass destruction? What does this say about the vulnerability of trust in our most intimate relationships? Can we ever truly know someone's capacity for evil, especially when they've perfected the art of deception? The intersection of mental health issues, narcissistic personality traits, and access to victims creates a perfect storm for family violence. Erin's inability to accept rejection, combined with her need to maintain a perfect image, led to calculated murder when her world started crumbling. This case shows us that evil doesn't always look like what we expect. Subscribe for more deep dives into the psychology of crime, and remember, trust your instincts. They might save your life. Remember our opening question: what if the deadliest meal in Australian history looked like a loving family gathering? Now you know the answer. It did look exactly like love, exactly like care, exactly like family. And that's what makes Erin Patterson's crimes so terrifying and so unforgettable. One woman's resentment destroyed multiple families forever, proving that sometimes the greatest danger comes from those we trust the most.